Well, good afternoon, first and foremost. I'm very happy to be joined by yourself, Manuel, today. Let me first emphasize why I'm joined by Manuel today. He's someone I had a chance to meet 3 months ago when I started in this role, roundabout. It was one of the first partners I had a chance to meet. First and foremost, what I would emphasize talking to Manuel that I learned first is that you never basically lived the costing environment. So throughout your life, professional career as well as the academic career, you've always sort of been part of costing, right? As far as I remember, and do correct me if I'm wrong. But 2009, you have graduated from industrial engineering, and that was just the time when the financial crisis came to Europe. So maybe give us a few sentences about how that was and where did you go from there?
It was perfect timing to finish your studying. Yeah, you were prepared for the work environment all the time. See what great jobs are out there and how much is going on in industry and how much you can influence that. And then exactly when I graduated, the financial crisis basically hit. And then the only jobs that were left out there in the market were basically about cost cutting. Yeah, and somehow I didn't decide to go into cost cutting, but I was in the beginning push myself at least to get a job. And this is how I got the first contact.
Okay.
With costing.
So as far as I understand, I mean, obviously it wasn't easy to cut the cost during the financial crisis because obviously it was the emphasized value for everyone. But as far as I understand, then you moved to a costing side in Akku, which also took you to the United States, upon which you moved to the procurement side and looked at costing down. After which you moved to consulting. So I think it's fair to say that you have been on each aspect or each side of the costing environment. So client side, consulting side, and a user consumer side. Potentially, where did you see yourself the most, right?
Actually, I enjoyed all of those areas actually to start, because in the beginning of my career I started in engineering, totally into deep technical discussions and trying to optimize costs there. And I'm not talking about calculating costs, it was more like what kind of technical things can be changed, more like people business, moderating them. And then when I switched to procurement, it was something totally different, because then you had to deal with suppliers, with the outside world, with outside stakeholders, and then you came more into this cost calculation, because that was the methodology at that time that we basically established in that company, and we were doing some try and error in the beginning, because Echo is an agricultural company, and we're not BMW, so they started 2007, 8, and 9 when they hired all the people, and we were at that time just trying to figure out how can we adapt that somehow to our business area, how does that work. We made a lot of mistakes, but we did some things quite right. We could take some things from the automotive industry, some things we had to develop by ourselves. But that gave me a total different perspective. Okay, now not dealing with internal people anymore, now discussing with suppliers out there, building up processes, because sometimes processes in engineering were already there, we just had to live them. But then here we had to build up everything new. And then I went to consulting, and I said, okay, all that knowledge that I got, can I just take it and implement it at other companies? And then I got to learn a lot of different other companies, other branches, other areas, and I can see no one is close to each other and everything is new, so you cannot adapt anything. It's good that you have the knowledge, but somehow everything is unique in that. So if you ask me what I like the most, I feel comfortable in consulting because sharing my knowledge and also gaining more knowledge while we have some projects. But to be honest, I don't regret being out there in the industry and see also the other side, how it feels like dealing within companies like large enterprise, but also small companies.
No, thank you very much for sharing the background. I think it's quite valuable. And since our conversation today is all about costing, cost engineering, I think it makes sense we start off with dominant distinction or the predominant question in the industry, and this is differentiating the cost engineering from value engineering, right? I already see you smile. I'm guessing you already have quite a lot of arguments to make, but what is for you the main difference between the cost engineering and the value engineering?
It's funny because sometimes some people see it like cost engineering, everything is the same, and It could be. It's like it's just what I say from my point of view. You can distinguish those two actually. So from cost engineering, for me, it's more like the calculation part, like the crunching the number part, and it basically answers one question. So where does the money go and why? Yeah, and then value engineering is a little bit more different. It's more like where is value created in which products and what does it cost over the lifetime. So but both of them have to actually play a role. They have to work together somehow, because without like a clear cost structure and transparency, the value discussions in a project become somehow emotional sometimes. Also, when you don't have like the value in mind already, what kind of value the product should bring, then the cost discussions that you have, they end up somewhere in a blind spot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think it definitely makes sense, and I think this distinction is really important to be communicated at all stages of the production lines, because they often get intertwined, and people do forget their meaning, right?
Yeah.
What we face a lot dealing with companies out there, and cost engineers in particular from Tset side, is essentially the diverse level of readiness when it comes to cost engineering, right? Moving to the cost engineering part of the conversation. And this is where we see the emerging cost engineering teams in small to medium enterprises, and then we have the established teams that are not looking to increase their size or the abilities or the resources, but they're looking to more crunch their efficiency, right? Because they have already reached a certain size. Now, because the backbone of European economy is the SME sector, I think we're talking about more than 80% of the businesses in European Union. How do you see the perception versus reality of cost engineering in these medium-sized companies?
That's actually a good question, especially when cost engineering, like the cost analysis, it's not like that the companies are that small, because some of the companies don't have any ability or any capacity or any people who do the cost analysis, but some of them already have that. But if you can imagine, if you're not a big company, you cannot have for every manufacturing method the exact specialist there, because then otherwise, I just give you an example, if your procurement team is like 8 people and you have like 20 people because you have that many different manufacturing methods, it's just doesn't work and it's not going to happen. So they have to somehow specialize a little bit, figure out where are the main manufacturing methods, and focus on them. Could be sometimes CNC or sheet metal and so on. But on the rest of it, you have to rely on actually a little bit support, and sometimes you get support from different tools already, or you then have to somehow buy also this knowledge, because you cannot build it up and just hold it in your company. It doesn't work.
Yeah, so we go back to the resources in the cost engineering department, right? And it's always an eternal topic. What do you make? What do you buy? Where do you invest? Where do you spend time? Where do you make sure that your team spends time? And what do you want to make sure that someone else spends time for? It is an art to one extent or another. But what would you say is an operational impact of lacking these cost engineering capabilities?
I mean, it's not just operational. I mean, it affects like the strategic part of it, but also the operational part. If you have like no cost knowledge at all, then I mean, it starts in development already. So it's not developed because it's the best cost perfect product, because it's like the product that might last long, and is sometimes also not developed to be manufactured like in an easy way. And if you go back to then procurement, for example, you do like cost comparisons, but you don't have like a negotiations which are fact-based, which are really like down to how much the single step basically costs. And then you can also you can bring it to management, because management has to make decisions somehow, and they're sometimes not fact-based on cost. Sometimes they're made on assumptions and so on, so they are if you don't have a cost base, you have to do it like that, but that can lead to actually wrong decisions that you have, especially when it comes to like make or buy or strategic decisions and so on. And if you rely on those assumptions and they are wrong, that can have massive effect.
Yeah. Since we are now on an operational level, right, I think the only natural question that comes to my mind is not the differentiation, but it's more of a relationship between the leadership perception and the operational efficiency, the resource gain that we've previously mentioned. what we see oftentimes, and I'm sure that you share the view to one extent or another, feel free to disagree, but essentially the leadership perception of cost engineering resources is often put in a bracket of cost down or reporting capabilities. And in some cases, this view might be outdated, right? How do you see it?
Absolutely, because nowadays, I mean, there's so much has changed right now. So it's more like there's the electrification is coming on. There are new manufacturing methods that we have to deal with. There are regulatory requirements that we have to take a look at right now, and there's also like in overall increasing complexity within that. And cost engineering is not just like it was years ago that you go through the BOM line by line, you know, and trying to optimize the costs and get transparency here. It's much more complex nowadays.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, and I think you know, we oftentimes get too operational, as I've previously indicated, and then the question is about a single product, and the question is about a single project, the question is about a single calculation, but then we oftentimes forget to put this cost engineering topic in a 5 to 10 year long-term planning perspective. And this is exactly where I want to go next, 5-year comparison. Looking at the last 5 years, looking at the next 5 years, I think it's no secret that the technological capabilities have changed. The digital level of literacy has changed among the teams. I think it's safe to say that some companies were also forced by the competition to digitalize to one extent or another, sharing information internally. What changed and what stayed the same?
Actually has changed a lot because, as I said, the electrification, but also the software, has become major cost blocks right now. We have so many regulatories, and they have to be considered as well. And sometimes they led to design constraints, so you cannot do whatever you want to. You are limited somehow, but also. Yeah, it gives you the indication you have to put in additional costs just to fulfill those regulations in your own product, and that's actually a big topic. And I think what unfortunately nowadays is still the case that this cost engineering area is still somehow treated as like as a department that can be used or a method that can be used, but is not fully integrated. You know, it's that okay, if you have to reduce the cost, involve cost engineering, rather than cost engineering is fully integrated part. It is from the beginning of the development phase until the end, even after SOP, even after phase out. Somehow the learnings go back into the new one. So that is actually something that has to change, and I can still see that out there in many companies. It has not, unfortunately. You know, they build up cost engineering teams and use it as some kind of internal consultants if it's needed, and that has to change.
No, absolutely agreed. I think in previous few sentences we have mentioned the word regulation a few times. I think it's a bit ungrateful from my side to emphasize. It's one of my favorite topics because it is one of the topics that has not only had a negative impact but created a headache for plenty of people in a market, because it's just been a very volatile area with a lot of gray information. One thing that comes to my mind immediately is carbon. Right? Carbon has been a sustainability topic for years. It is now a cost component.
Absolutely.
So my question here is, how do you see the regulation realm, and how much impact do you think these regulations have on cost engineering? Because we were no strangers to conflict minerals regulations. We were no strangers to tariffs that also have changed certain aspects of how the operations is conducted. But how do you see the regulation realm in cost engineering?
That's actually a very good question. So I don't want to go into that tariff topic here right now, because I think it was discussed over the last weeks, months, and years quite a lot, and especially in 2025. But definitely regulations have some impact on the cost engineering. I'm just giving one example. If you have out there, and I'm just not saying that it's bad that we have those regulations. It's pretty good that we have them. We just have to see what is basically the impact of those regulations. One example, if there are certain materials which are not allowed anymore, which makes totally sense point of view, but companies have built up their projects and products for a long time, and so those kind of materials are in their products already, and they have to change that now. And I'll give you just one example. Let's say a certain material is not allowed anymore. It's in the product, how to get that out of it. Of course, you can take a look at from technical point of view, which kind of material has the same properties. But then, especially within cost engineering, you have to always take a look at the impact that it has, because that product might have an impact on the manufacturing methods. They might be different, totally different. They might have an effect on the existing tools, because some of the tools were specially designed for that material. Now the material changed. Can we still use those tools? Do they last that long? Do we have like, I don't know, to refurbish them even more often, which increases the cost, obviously. But then also to other areas, you know, do we have the possibility to get like in all our supply markets that material? As the supplier base the same way? Do we have the same costs for that material, or is it like more expensive because, you know, suppliers know now everyone is changing to that one, that increases the cost, could be. So we have to like take a look at what kind of impact does it have, not just on cost itself and not just on cost on the part, but also all the costs which are involved out there. And that actually can have an impact also on sales in the end, because if you increase your COGS out of that, you know, what kind of impact does it have on the sales price? Do we lower our margin then in the for the product, or do we have to increase the prices in the end for the end customer, and do we kick each other out of the market because other companies which do not fall under those regulatories might have an advantage then?
Yep. And this is an internal topic, right? Who's going to bear the cost of regulation? Is it the company? Is it the economy? Or is it the end user? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't think any of us is knowledgeable enough to sort of open a light ball and say what the future looks like.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely something we have to keep an eye on. We have covered your background that I appreciate a lot because it's very different to mine. I think you have covered the academic side of costing. You have covered the engineering side of costing. Now you're covering partially the or fully the consulting part of costing. As far as I see it in your role leading the team at Costineers, you do have to wear two hats at the same time, right? So you have to be the engineer and the consultant at the same time. Potentially, I give you a chance to say a few words about what you do at Costineers, what you stand for. But then what I'm really curious about is how do you essentially combine this cost engineering and value engineering as Costineers?
Yes, thank you for that question. Yes, first of all, I would like to maybe introduce Costineers a little bit. So we are specialized consultancy focusing on costs, as the name said already. So our main goal is to reduce COGS. So we are basically not doing any cost cutting within employees, reduction, whatever. We are just focusing on the product itself. So reducing the COGS, increasing value, means getting the customer's perception, take a look at what the customers actually want out there, and then also trying to bring that into the product itself. A good part is that we are combining those cost engineering and value engineering topics. So cost engineering, which is the cost analysis, is part of our value engineering approach, but it's also like a standalone thing that we do. We calculate parts for procurement departments and for other companies and go into negotiation with suppliers. But that's just a very small portion what we do in our approach. We're basically coming from the value engineering point of view. And we always start from the market. So I'm throwing around now a few interesting words. For example, we always start with the URS, our user requirement specification, because this is something that we should get and every company should have in the sales or product management department to see what actually the customer and the user out there wants to have. And this somehow has to be translated then into the FDS, which is the functional design specification. So if you translate that in the product, what kind of functions the product should basically fulfill. Yep. And the next step would be to translate that one into the TDS, which is a technical design specification, means how does those functions, how are they technically fulfilled. So when we go into a company and have some cost down projects, the first thing we do, we go to the engineers and ask them, can you show me the URS, you know, because you designed the part, the URS, does it fulfill that? And the URS, from our point of view, should be the Bible for the development engineers. And most of the time, the guys say, "Oh, I don't have it here right now." But it's not to blame on them, because most of the companies just can't pull it out of their storage, because it's sometimes not there. Sometimes it's isolated within the sales department. But this is our starting point. And even if you don't have that in the beginning, you have serious products out there and want to optimize them, you can get that information with methods like conjoint analysis or other methods, and can basically bring that into the project and always come from the market point of view when you are trying to get some ideas on how to reduce the costs.
Oh, thank you very much. I think it's a very interesting project, not necessarily only a project, but approach to these projects, because you essentially, I'm going to use the word that everyone is kind of hyping up right now, but holistic approach, because you really try to get a full big picture and then kind of break it down into smaller components, which I think is very necessary in order to really understand what moves the needle. Now we have discussed the cost engineering, we have discussed its distinction to value engineering, we have looked back into what has shaped this industry into what it is today. I would like us to move into direction of thinking about the future, right? We don't have this magic ball that we can just sort of touch and immediately identify what will be the topic in 3 to 5 years from now, but there are few emerging topics that we can all agree on, right? There is the software topic, the electronic topic, but there is always the topic of consolidation of this information through digital system. These are some of the trends that we see, but I think it would also make sense to also see what these trends look like from your perspective, because in the end of the day, you are the one dealing with SMEs in European Union.
That's exactly right. So especially also when you ask you about the trends, you mentioned it already. Those are basically the trends that come up right now, especially when it comes to like software, electrification. The product life cycles become shorter, so a lot of things are changing, and this is something, the trend will go on like that, and there will be more like a hardware software integration. You cannot just go on the hardware anymore. You have to see how can I deal with the software. And then the next point is also the regulations that you already mentioned. We have here carbon and all that stuff was in the beginning nice to have. Now it somehow influences the costs. You have to track that. You have to bring it down. You have to, as I said already in the beginning, that sometimes those regulations are constraints and influence directly the costs. But then you have the AI topic or digitization. There are trends out there like digital twins, not just for the products, but also for whole manufacturing sites. There's the topic of AI, which will play a major role within cost engineering, I'm sure. Are we that far? I think we can discuss that a little bit as well. I don't think so, but it's definitely something which will come up within the next years. Yeah.
No, definitely. I think this is one of the topics that we see plenty of the time, right? It's the digitalization, but in what sense, right? One very simple line of communication I hear plenty of times when behind closed doors is, okay, let's move away from these complex expressions and just communicate digitalization as the ability to communicate the cost engineering knowledge or know-how to the rest of the organization, right? So we can even simplify the communication and say, look, it is my cost engineer's memory for the rest of the procurement organization, right? As an example of digitalization and sharing this information. Yep. Going back to the trends, because we said, okay, these were the trends that shaped the last 5 years. These are the trends that shape the next 3 to 5 years. It's the software, it's the electronics, it's the digitalization. But where would you see as the most underestimated trend? Because these trends that we just mentioned are also in line with the high-level trends that are communicated on a national level, on the economy level. The AI is the expression that we can't run away from anymore. But what would you say is in reality the most underestimated trend?
Short word, I would say the organizational one. Because like the engineering data, procurement data, sustainable metrics that we have, cost structures and so on. So integrate that somehow, this is not a tool problem, so the tools can do it. It's a governance problem, definitely. It
is, and essentially not to point fingers, this leads me to ask the following, right? With the trends, with the patterns, with the organizational change, with the amount of AI mentioned, where do you see it overhyped? Where do you see it underhyped? How do you see AI in cost engineering?
I think AI helps a lot where I would say patterns repeat. So you can use it already, for example, identifying cost drivers in cost engineering. Take a look at if there are any certain things at supplier quotes that you can figure out. Out there in the market are a lot of companies who are actually trying to find similar parts within a big organization. When you are have a lot of, let's say, small parts which are developed over the time, and maybe you buy some new companies, integrate them, you have even more parts. Like to find out, is there anything out there already? AI is pretty helpful on that if you have the certain parameters where you can search for them. But on the other side, when it comes to engineering, especially in very early phases, I think AI currently is overhyped there. So it needs more like, you need the people, you need the knowledge, you need basically, the market input for that. So I don't see AI right now. I'm not saying that in the future it might change, but right now I don't see it as a big advantage.
No, definitely. Yeah. Look, let's imagine I'm a company X, and let's imagine the best case scenario where we have internally identified overhyped and underhyped areas of AI that we can implement for our organization. Now, what I'm curious about is how you see the prerequisites to the AI implementation, because it's not a black box that you just sort of open and it fixes everything around, but you would need certain elements to be in place before you can rely on AI infrastructure and execution, right? So what are these prerequisites in your point of view?
I think first of all, when it comes to AI, you need the data. You need the data. It has to be very clear. It has to be fine. But you need also like structured cost models for that. You need transparent cost models and assumptions that you take. But you also need some kind of governance model for that. And those 4 blocks basically is for me the fundament to get that thing running.
Since we are still here speaking about essentially the future of cost engineering and costing as such, what do you think will companies regret not paying attention to right now, or potentially paying attention on a conceptual level rather than starting with?
That's actually also a good question. It's not just for 2026, but also for the future itself. I think companies definitely need to build cost transparency, because it's absolutely needed. They have to integrate the data into their systems. They have to clear their data, and also they have to develop cost engineering capabilities, even if you don't have that. And we started in the beginning with small and medium enterprises. Some of them are actually very far. We can see that already at our clients, very far on that. Some of them just start from scratch, but don't see it as a nice to have. So this is something you definitely have to develop, because the market is becoming much more complex right now, much more competitive. And if you are stuck behind because of you don't have the capabilities and you don't have the transparency right now with your own costs, that would be a shame.
We have discussed past trends. We have discussed the current state of the industry. We have discussed the future trends. Now, let's imagine that you have the ability to magically address every CEO out there of the industrial company. What would be your message to those CEOs?
I would say don't treat that cost engineering as a purchasing or controlling topic, rather than treating it as a core engineering capability. And this is what we do at Costineers as well, because as the name already said, Costineers, so we are costing and engineers. And we emphasize that as well.
Oh, thank you very much. Look, I think for the end, the only logical closure that I have is potentially looking back at our partnership. Mm-hmm. I think plenty of potential partners out there, I think plenty of engineers out there immediately interpret, Tset costing software and the costing capabilities as a competition, which I can hardly disagree with or fully disagree with, because in the end of the day, I think we both agree that there is a level of synergy. I think in the end of the day, you are a great testament to that, because you are using the platform to deliver some of your projects or bring added value. Potentially take us through your experience dealing with Tset platform, and what has your experience been like?
As I said in the beginning, like the cost engineering part is just a small portion of what Costineers is basically doing. And of course, we're also calculating parts for the procurement department, but it's just like, I would say it's 10% of that. We see our competences more in value engineering. Mm-hmm. And actually, as I said in the beginning, we're trying to develop together with the clients ideas to reduce the costs on design changes, manufacturing changes, and so on, to see where the customer basically has a benefit out of it. And those ideas, they are first of all just on paper. And somehow we say, okay, if we change a material, if we change something else, how much does that bring? And we use actually should costing and Tset, the tool, not to calculate parts that are existing already. We use it to calculate those concepts. We say, okay, imagine that part would be a different manufacturing method with a different technology, with different material. How much would that idea basically bring to our cost reduction project? And this is how we use that. And then we can say, also from a market point of view, yeah, and imagine if we would produce that in another country or something like that, so we can switch around
with a different machine
as well. Exactly,
yeah.
with a different machine. And this is where we can basically get target costs within this value engineering project using the Tset software, because we have the information in there. So I would say, yeah, we are somehow doing the same thing when it comes to procurement, but most of the time we are using it in value engineering, and actually it proves to be very efficient. Yeah.
No, I couldn't agree more. Look, I'll put you on a spot here by asking the next question. And this is, how else would you do it if you would not be using Tset software? Would it be Excel and potentially much more manual effort, or how have you done it before Tset? Let's put it that way.
It's a mixture between Excel and guesstimating. Yeah, so it would be more like relying on the people itself who have the cost knowledge. Then we write it down in Excel and said if it would be in China, it would be 20% less or something like that. So there's not a real fact-based, let's say, possibility to go into those ideas and do like exact should cost out of it. So you need some kind of support in that, and this is what we found with the Tset software.
Look, I think I've exhausted all my questions. I also don't want to keep you here the whole day. Thank you for coming to Vienna in the first place. It's been nothing but a pleasure. I also had a chance to learn a few things I did not think about earlier. So thank you very much for that, and I hope this is not the last time we have a conversation in such a format.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.